I said that I believe that Ozempic and other similar types of drugs are going to be seen as the next generation cigarettes. And a bunch of people were freaking out. Immediately in my head, I'm like, okay, I'm close to the truth.
Could Bitcoin become the money of the galaxy?
There's some Bitcoiners who they think that for sure.
Does AI affect Bitcoin?
Bitcoin is AI. That'll trigger some people.
All right, Pomp, thank you so much for joining me on my channel today. As fate would have it, I got sick yesterday right before this, and we scheduled this month in advance, so that's just my luck. But after I badgered you for so much time, really thank you for coming on this podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's all right. Being sick is perfectly fine. Drink some water and you'll be perfectly good to go.
Yep, well, vitamin C, and I'm feeling better today already. But where I wanted to start today is you recently moved back to New York City after being in Miami for a bit. When you moved back first, you called New York City the modern day Rome. And if you could talk about some of the differences between Miami and New York and what led you to coming back. And yeah.
They're both amazing cities, right? There's plenty of people I know who are like Miami haters. I'm not in that category at all. I actually think Miami is probably one of the cities in America that is doing things the most right. They've got low taxes. They continue to compete on a national and international stage for entrepreneurs, capital providers, weather, right? You can't recreate that in many other places. And then there is this kind of entrepreneurial energy that happens, especially when you have a very high concentration of immigrants. And so there's a million things that you could say positively about Miami. And after having lived there for 2.5 years, I'm a pretty big believer in what they're building there and kind of can continue. While we moved back, I think that we missed certain components of New York, specifically kind of the density of people. We have a young child, and one of the things that we really wanted to do is kind of grow up in a kind of very dense urban area. A bunch of reasons why. And so we live within walking distance of Central Park. And so still kind of get some of the, outdoor area exposure for our daughter, but at the same time, kind of in that really high, dense urban area. And so, if you were to ask my wife, she really loves New York. I'm more in the camp of I could be happy anywhere. I love New York. I love Miami. I could live pretty much in any city in the country or in the world. But we're back and very excited about it.
And you grew up in New York City, right?
I spent a number of years here, but I grew up in North Carolina, and then not until kind of post college did I really move to New York.
Okay. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about your story of joining the U.S. Army. How was your experience in the Army?
Yeah. I mean, it was great. I went when I was pretty young. I signed up when I was 17 years old, spent 6.5 years in the Army, deployed overseas in 2008, 2009 to Iraq. It was one of those experiences where I was able to take a lot of positives, in kind of using my life moving forward, specifically around leadership. So you learn quite a bit in terms of small teams and how to kind of communicate and, lead folks who aren't necessarily like you, right? Many times in the military, I was in a leadership position where people were much older than me, had more experience than me. And so how do you actually create some sort of, relationship with that person where you have influence? It's not just, hey, the rank on my chest is higher than the rank on your chest, and therefore you got to listen to me. And so I think that was, probably one of the biggest takeaways. The second thing was when I deployed overseas, I was 20 years old, turned 21 in the desert. And I was with people who they had real lives, right? They had, mortgages and kids and kind of the day-to-day struggles and challenges of being an adult. When you're a kid, I was worried about what party there was in college, right? You don't know about any of that stuff. And so it forced me to grow up pretty quickly, which ended up being a really positive thing. And then lastly is you get this exposure to mortality, and you realize whether you like it or not, no one so far has escaped that beast. And so, you've got some finite amount of time here on earth, and just you want to use as much of it as you possibly can to enjoy it and kind of squeeze every ounce of kind of happiness and life out of that time. And so when I came back, I really, really leaned into that and tried to do the best I could.
So I feel like joining any branch of the military doesn't seem like it's on the path for a lot of people today. And I was wondering, would you recommend it for people who, are like yourself who want to be successful in business and other ventures throughout their life, does joining the military set them up for success throughout their life?
Depends who you are, right? Depends what you're trying to accomplish. For me, I was a highly ambitious type A personality who, when 9/11 happened, I think it really kind of, struck a chord in me that if our country was going to go to war, then I'd be willing to go. Right. And, I probably was naive in terms of what war, why, where, all these kind of different components. But at the time, it didn't matter to me. It was just like, hey, I'll go do it. Now, I've got four younger brothers. Some of them thought about going and doing it. And I was, pretty adamant that I did not want them to go do that. That they're their own people and they can make their own decisions. But I felt like, our family in general had sacrificed enough, and having one of us go was all that we needed. Along the same lines, I did learn a lot, right? It was a very positive experience. And so I think that there is a certain type of person who, can get tons of leadership and structure and discipline and life experience out of it. There's other people who they may want to gather certain life experiences or learn certain skills, but they don't need to go do it in the military. They may be able to go do it, some other way. And so in my head, I kind of have this framework that everyone ends up serving the country, right? Sometimes it is with military uniform on, a flag on your shoulder, and a weapon in your hand. Other people maybe are a police officer or a firefighter. Other people work inside of the healthcare system, and they do everything from deliver babies to, care for the sick and the elderly. And then there's other people who are entrepreneurs, and they go and they help build GDP growth, and they help solve problems, within our country. And then others are politicians, right? And for all the shit that we give them, they actually are the leaders of the country, and they try to help come up with policies and work together. And so regardless of kind of how you end up actually serving, I think if you kind of just look at the things you do on a day-to-day basis is trying to serve the collective good and really kind of push forward society and the country, then that's probably a net positive.
So it's interesting that you brought up how you didn't want your brothers to go serve. So I come from a family where both my grandparents were Marines. I have two cousins that are Marines, and my youngest brother is deploying this summer. He enlisted to be a Marine, and I was wondering if you have any advice that you would give him. We're beyond the point of where we don't want him to go. He's going for sure. So do you have any advice for him?
Well, when you go to basic training, just remember the drill sergeants are paid to fuck with you. That's probably the easiest one. And so, when I was there, again, I was 17. I was going to play college football. I was, in the best shape of my life. And so, the drill sergeants literally would just randomly call my name whenever they were bullshitting with other drill sergeants, and they would say, just start doing push-ups. And it was almost like they were proud of the fact that like I could sit there and do push-ups for a long time, but yeah, sure, they were proud, but I was tired, right? I'm like, hey man, I get you're trying to show off to your buddy here, but like, can I get up? And so you just got to remember it's all kind of a game, and yeah, it sucks at times, but if you kind of keep that in your mind, you'll be okay. And then when you get deployed, I think the other piece that kind of gets lost is like, look, the training's important. Right. I've told a story before that we went through some training before we went to Iraq. And, frankly, it's kind of like stupid, or at least you think it's stupid, right? Like they're like setting off like fake bombs. And then you're supposed to, kind of react in a certain way or do this or whatever. And you're like, there's no danger here. Well, first time an IED went off in Iraq, every single person did exactly what they were supposed to do. And I remember as soon as it went off, it was just almost like human instinct. We just immediately all started calling out, exactly what was happening, started maneuvering into positions, etc. And what you realize is like the training worked. And so, if I could go back, I think that I would take it even more seriously than I did, because you never know, what piece of training is actually going to be the thing that ends up saving your or your buddy's life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so playing college football and serving the military and all these things would lead me to believe that you're probably a pretty competitive person. And you look at all the people who are super successful, the great examples of Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. Do you think being a competitive person and that trait goes hand in hand with success?
I mean, maybe there's people who are successful who are not competitive, but if you really think of what success is, it's winning, right? And so being competitive tends to lead itself to somebody wanting to win. And so, sure, I think that there is some degree of competitiveness that is a key ingredient for winning. But, look, I've been doing this long enough now where I've met people who have started companies that literally were starting it as like, hobbies. I know friends who are like, I'm the laziest person in the world, and I started this business because I didn't want to do X. And the next, it becomes big, right? I've got friends who run businesses and they don't even meet with their teams. Like everything is done asynchronously, in Google Docs. I then know people who, are similar to like an Elon Musk who will go and they'll like sleep in the office. And so I think my bigger takeaway is there are a bunch of different ways that you can be successful. You just got to find what's the right way for you. And there is this important exercise that people should go through, which is essentially, what do I want to get out of life? And if I win the game that I'm playing right now, will it help me get that thing that I want out of life? And so many people, I think, just do stuff that make no sense, right? Or they're like, hey, I'm working on X. And then you ask them, like, cool, what does that look like in terms of success? They tell you. And then you're like, all right, is that what you want to do with your life? They're like, no, actually, I want to do Y. Well, like, just like go do Y. Right. And I think that is short termism or whatever, but it just kind of plagues society. And so the more you can fight that, the better off you'll be.
That kind of reminds me of like the sort of catchphrase of my channel is like bargain with life for a penny. And it comes directly from a poem by Jesse B. Rittenhouse. And it's basically just meaning that like whatever you ask for of life, you'll get. So set your standards high, set your expectations high, your goals high. Because a lot of people just settle for, well, like you said, short-term happiness.
100%. And look, it's this very weird thing. I think Ryan Holiday has said previously, like he'll talk to someone and be like, cool, so like you're building this company, you're like sacrificing your life, you're doing all this stuff, like what are you going to do when you're done with it? And they're like, I'll like go write books. He's like, why don't you just go do that now? You got plenty of money, right? Like, what is the thing that you're chasing? And so I do think that is kind of a unique view of the world, because people, they don't plan enough or think about, like, if I win this game, is it the game that I want to win? And so just remember, goes back to kind of the military lesson of time is, finite. Use it how you see best fit for yourself.
Now, right after college, you worked for companies like, I don't know about right after college, but you worked for Facebook and Snapchat. And now that you post a lot on social media, do you take anything you learned from working like behind the scenes with them on the other side that you use today?
Yeah, when I was at Facebook, it was my first experience with really kind of how the algorithms work and kind of content on the internet or growing these audiences. I first ran a team as a product manager that was the growth team for Facebook pages, so kind of small businesses trying to build their audience and find customers, things like that. I then was very fortunate to have an opportunity to go work directly for Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg for a short period of time, and they were focused on how do they grow their audiences. And they'll never get credit for it, but this is kind of end of 2014. They were very early to the whole like go direct. And so that was, eye-opening experience, not only to kind of get exposure to them and see how they think and act and operate, but also just, hey, how do you grow things on the internet? And so when I started on Twitter, a couple years later, definitely I took a lot of those lessons and was able to apply them for myself.
So now today, when you're doing like VC investing and all that, how important is the founder of the company versus the product or service that they actually have, and which is more important to you?
Definitely the founder. I mean, look, everything is important, but part of what product gets built, what market they're going after, is all a byproduct of who the founder is, right? If you've got a great entrepreneur, like they will figure it out. If you just evaluate things on what is the product today and what is the market today, you're not accounting for all the change that's going to occur. And so, I've said for years that some of our best companies were businesses that maybe they're like in the same market ish, but they've changed the product, the competition's changed, the market conditions have changed, et cetera. And so, if you're going to end up kind of raising capital or building a company focused on A to start, but you end up actually being successful with C, well, it's the founder who ends up making those decisions and kind of evolving the product and the strategy in the company to be able to get there. And so I just spent a lot of time on, am I backing the right person?
Yeah, and so everybody knows you for Bitcoin, obviously, and I promise if people have clicked on this expecting us to talk about it, I will bring it up. But If I don't know if you want to name it, but could you name like your most successful non-Bitcoin investment so far?
Um, I'd have to look at all the different numbers. Some of them that come to mind, I've seed invested in, I don't know, probably 8 or 9 unicorns at this point. So each one of those are obviously highly successful. There's one, maybe I'll give you like a fun one. I don't know if it's the exact like best performing one, but it's definitely one that has gone very well and I think would surprise people. I invested back in probably 2016 or so in a company called 2U Laundry. 2U Laundry. This is at the same time that there was tons of companies being funded 2014, 2015, and into 2016 to do like on-demand laundry. So like Uber for laundry. But their big insight was like, first of all, no one like is like press a button, come do my laundry right now. Like it can wait, right? It could do tomorrow or whatever. And the second thing was they built a company at Wake Forest University that they essentially told students, leave your laundry outside your dorm room door. We'll come by on, Tuesday at 5 p.m. We'll pick everyone's up. We'll go do it. And then we'll bring it back by Wednesday at 5 p.m. or something. Right. And so it's this like static line type thing. So long story short is they started a company doing that. Fast forward to today, not only do they have that successfully operating in certain markets, they also have a physical location. Think of it as like a corporate store in Charlotte, North Carolina. And they now have started to franchise this across the country. And so that business, they just raised a $20 million Series B and, pretty attractive valuation. We're up many multiples on our original investment. And it just goes to show you, like, everyone always jokes like, laundry is recession proof. These guys were able to figure out a way to combine kind of old school, kind of blue collar type business, a lot of operational excellence with some technology. And they're able to build something that seems to be working at a time when all of the other competition kind of ran out of the gate, raised tons of money to start, almost 10 years ago now. They tried to be tech only and ended up falling and most of those companies went out of business. And so, it's kind of a classic story of the tortoise and the hare.
So with all of your like many things that you're doing every day, investing and media and all of this, do you have a set daily schedule, or do you just have certain things you gotta accomplish every day? And like, do you have a routine? How does all that shake out?
I would say I have a loose routine. I wake up in the morning. I always go and get some coffee for my wife and I. I then sit down. I start writing. Once I'm done writing, I usually will then tackle email next, and then I start calls and meetings. I try as hard as I can to keep video stuff together. And then if I've got a string of phone calls, I may have 4 or 5 30-minute phone calls back to back. I'll try to go for a walk outside while I do the calls. And then I try, after a certain period of time of the day to spend as much time as I can with my wife and my daughter. And then towards the end of the day, I will read quite a bit, and then also try to any loose ends on email or anything, and then just get up and do it again the next day.
So you've interviewed so many successful, smart, interesting people throughout your YouTube journey. What is the most impactful conversation you had, the one you learned the most, and the one you think people should go and watch?
There's no way I could just pick one of them. I would say there tends to be a high correlation between views and like value that people got from it, especially on YouTube. So, going and just kind of looking at like the top viewed ones probably is helpful. Some of my favorites probably aren't actually the finance ones. Like, obviously I spent a lot of time talking about finance. But one of the conversations that really sticks out is I interviewed Sean Ryan. Sean's a former Navy SEAL, former CIA contractor, and it's just a conversation that I had where you listen to the guy and you're like, man, he's one of the great warriors that has done his job and served America in a great way. He's now got a very popular podcast. I think he's got one of the top 15 podcasts in the country. And he's taking on serious, hard topics and kind of having conversations around that stuff. And so he's a great one. There's another gentleman named Eric Spofford. Eric basically had the worst situation you could possibly imagine. He was a criminal. He had stabbed someone. He was a drug addict. Everything had gone wrong in this guy's life. And sometimes because he made bad decisions, and other times just that bad shit happened in his life. But at some point he was able to turn it around. He ended up building a very, very large kind of rehabilitation facility chain. He sold that for a big number. and now spends a lot of time, kind of building a second business, talking about his experience, etc. And so that was kind of just the story of like you could start out in a really bad situation, but you can turn your life around and do it fairly quickly in a decade or so, and so pretty inspiring. And then one of the fan favorites, I think, is Kat Cole. Kat used to be the president of Focus Brands. She was the president of Cinnabon. She started out as a Hooters hostess, I think became a waitress, and then now is the president, COO, and board member at Athletic Greens, or now known as AG1. And so has had an incredible career and just very, very well versed in management of people, building companies, CPG, etc.
Okay, so now I want to spin it to the Bitcoin part of the conversation. And from what I've noticed when I post about Bitcoin on social media, and just from like reading things, that I feel like people who are not focused on Bitcoin or even investing in general generally have a disdain for crypto and Bitcoin. Would you agree with me when I say that, that like the general public dislikes all of it together?
I think that for sure there's some people that fall into that category. Other people, are agnostic, and some people even are sympathetic to it, right? It's the people who tend to not like it. I put them in usually one of three categories. They don't like the people who are, constantly talking about it. So they've got an issue with the people, not the technology or the asset. There's a second group of people who basically they're pissed off. They spend, hours and hours every single week trying to beat indexes or drive returns, and they could have just bought Bitcoin. And so they're like, who the hell are these people on the internet who just bought this Bitcoin thing and they beat me? So there's, I don't know if that's jealousy, envy, whatever, but there's some of that going on. And then the third is the people who it violates their worldview, right? I mean, I talk to people sometimes and I'm like, I can't believe you believe what you're saying. Like, you actually think the government is coming to save you, or you actually think, inflation is not that high, or, name your, kind of insane assumption. You got to remember, like, yeah, there are people who believe that. And so when they see this asset that seems to violate a lot of the things that they believe, it confuses them, it upsets them. And some of that can be like, non-finance things like I just described. Some of it could just simply be like, hey, I only want to buy assets that have cash flow. This doesn't have cash flow. Why does it keep becoming more valuable? Right. And so, like, again, that violates your worldview from an investment standpoint, and therefore could lead to some disdain. But look, who cares what other people think? Right. There's a lot of views I think that I hold that I know people disagree with. And I've always said that whenever I say something publicly, if there's a ton of pushback, not like controversy of like, hey, I'm saying something that is, rude or inappropriate or something like that, but like I hold some view, let's say in the investment world. A recent example is I said that I believe that Ozempic and other similar types of drugs are going to be seen as the next generation cigarettes. And a bunch of people were freaking out, right? And immediately in my head, I'm like, okay, I'm close to the truth. Right. Like I'm actually like I'm hitting on something here. And so I want to pay attention. Why are these people pushing back? What do they believe? What is the thing that they see that I don't see? Right. And what you end up getting at is there was actually a high degree of alignment in terms of it helps with weight loss. It helps with, cardiovascular risk, like all these things. But then there's also alignment on the downsides. Like, maybe if you become dependent on this, it actually isn't good for you. Or yes, you are losing weight, but you're not losing fat, you're losing bone density. Like, there's all these like nuances to it. And so what you start to understand is like, okay, if I have a framework in my head that I hold an opinion strongly, but loosely held, that I am willing to put out there, and there's a lot of pushback from the internet, and I can find enough other, kind of people I trust and think highly of that are hitting around a similar thing, it's likely that you're closer than not. And so that just takes time on the internet, right? That just takes like kind of practice. It takes getting yelled at quite a bit to start to see that framework. And so Bitcoin is a perfect example. Every time I see people having an absolute, like aneurysm basically on the internet, and they're freaking out, and you're just like, dude, this is just a piece of technology. Like, it really upsets you that much? Like, man, this may be more valuable. Maybe we're all actually have lower degree of confidence in this asset, and we should have a higher degree because of those types of reactions.
Mm-hmm. So there's been a couple crypto or Bitcoin cycles so far, and the past one with the collapse of FTX and how Bitcoin was in the spotlight for this one more than ever before. Was this the hardest crypto winter so far?
I think each one has a bunch of different, kind of pros and cons, right? In some ways, past bear markets, one of the pros was that the media wasn't really paying attention that much, and so there wasn't a ton of people yelling and screaming and kind of acting crazy. On this one, there was, right. Some of the downsides are in past bear markets. It's been very hard to convince people to still take a look at the assets or capital flow in, et cetera. This one, actually, if you look, like capital flew, kind of poured in, right? There was still quite a bit of interest. It may not be interest because of things that people in the industry want, but there was still interest. And so, I don't even know if comparing bear markets to each other, like you're going to get to an answer as much as when prices go down on an asset that your conviction hasn't changed, historically, getting more exposure to that asset at a lower price tends to be a positive. And so we'll kind of see what happens over the next couple of decades.
That's kind of advice I gave to one of my cousins who I was trying to get him into Bitcoin. And I said, just set like a weekly purchase limit and just forget about it and just see what happens. And now, after all this time, he's up on everything he's had so far. And it just takes out the volatility for these people who, they're not fully convinced. And it's just a good way to get your like toes in the water, right?
100%. Could not agree more.
Yeah. So the big talk of the town in the markets this year has been AI. It's probably drove the stock market higher, where it would have been a lot lower had AI not come into the hype cycle. Does AI affect Bitcoin?
Bitcoin is AI, right? Which, again, like that'll trigger some people, but what is AI? Like there's no true artificial intelligence, right? We're basically talking about machine learning and kind of computer code executing, right? And we're using computational power to do it at a scale, at a speed, and at a complexity that previously was very hard to imagine. But think about what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin basically is using computational power to defend a network. It is a programmatic monetary policy, right? So it's an automated system. And there's a lot of similarities. Now, it may be a really watered down kind of, elementary, example of quote unquote artificial intelligence. But again, when we start digging into like, what is this stuff? Really, this stuff ends up being the use of software and computational power to accomplish some task, right? And this whole idea of like artificial intelligence, yes, it's exciting, right? Like you go in chat GPT, start asking it questions, it answers in a certain way, you're like, man, it's pretty cool. Right. But same thing when you go and you use Bitcoin, right? You're like, wait a minute, I just transacted this and it didn't go through any sort of centralized party. Like, oh, that's interesting, right? And then you start actually looking at where these technologies can merge, right? And so, for example, if I have an AI agent, you have an AI agent, what are they going to do? Transact in physical cash? Like, no. So, okay, maybe they'll use electronic dollars, but if there's long settlement times of a day or two, how do you have automated transactions? So maybe actually something like Bitcoin becomes interesting, or stable coins, or whatever, right? And so I think that people want to draw really strict lines around these technologies and say like, no, this is AI, this is Bitcoin, this is this, right? And it's more so like, no, actually a lot of this stuff, there's blending of the lines, there's graying of the differences. And that's actually a good thing for society and for humans.
Now, I've seen you say before that you think Bitcoin could be the next world reserve currency, but why stop there? Elon Musk is sending rockets to Mars soon. Could Bitcoin become the money of the galaxy?
There's some Bitcoiners who they think that for sure. I don't know, right? Like I joke that we're still celebrating when some of these people go to like low orbit. Like we still have, we got some astronauts we put out there. We went to the moon, allegedly, and there's a lot of people who are like, look, we're gonna get to Mars, right? And I do believe that we will get to Mars. And there's what's the timeline? That's the hard part. But like this stuff feels like we are making serious progress towards it. And so if you take that into account, then the question becomes, okay, what do we do for money? What do we do for governance? Like, everyone was up in arms when Elon Musk said that he was going to make the rules on Mars. Like, oh, the billionaires can't make the rules. And basically, like, I think I tweeted it even. I was like, okay, cool. If you don't want him to make the rules, you get there first. Right. Like, it's just crazy to kind of debate these things until we even have the ability to get there. But I do know that it would be very difficult to use traditional fiat currencies in space. Forget Mars. So yeah, it's probably gonna be some sort of digital money. But you know, let's get there first, and then we'll figure out exactly which one it'll be.
Yeah, 100%. You know what Brad Gerstner is?
I know who he is. Yeah.
So he's been going around and saying, like, with a new policy that he wants to see implemented, where the U.S. government would open up a bank account, excuse me, a bank account for every child born in America, which is 3.7 million per year for $1,000, which would total 3.7 billion dollars, which is like less than 1/10 of 1% of the annual budget for the USA. Do you think that's a good idea, first of all? And what if they did $1,000 of Bitcoin for every child?
First, if we're going to do $3.7 billion, we got to cut $3.7 billion somewhere else. Ideally, we'd cut $10 billion somewhere else and do 3.7, right? We got to get the budget under control. But I do like the idea, right? I think it's smart in terms of trying to set these kids up for financial success. And if I understand it correctly, he wants basically just to be invested in the S&P 500. I think, right, and just like kind of let it compound, which would be fantastic, right, and obviously would put people in a much better position than they are otherwise. But you know, we got to balance the budget. We got to figure out where's that money going to come from. And then the other piece of it is like, does it go into the S&P? Does it go into Bitcoin? Yes, of course, people in the Bitcoin world wanted to go into Bitcoin. People in the stock world are like, that's insane. Why are we going to gamble people's future? The market's going to decide, right? I can tell you that I have a child. That child does not have S&P exposure. You know, the child has whatever exposure I got, and that tends to be much more Bitcoin. And so, you know, we'll see what happens, but it's almost like there is no quote unquote right answer, right? It's just getting a system set up, and frankly, just giving every child $1,000, forget even investing it, right, would be better than what we have now. And so, yes, if we could get a system where it could be invested for them, it could compound and put them in a good financial position, it's kind of a starting point. That'd be fantastic. He should get more credit, by the way, for the work he's doing. I mean, I know he's going on a lot of podcasts and, you know, television and stuff, and hopefully it catches on.
Yeah, I found a lot of what he says to be insightful. I love when he goes on the All In podcast with all those guys. It's very good to watch. A bit of a more technical question. So something I've wondered is, as I understand it now, the miners secure the Bitcoin network, and in 2140 or around there, no more Bitcoin will be put into circulation because that's when, you know, it finally winds down. So what happens to the miners then, and how is the network secured from that point on?
Transaction fees. So if you think right now in a block subsidy, you get, you know, whatever at the current times. Right now, 6.25 Bitcoin per block, 900 Bitcoin a day. And you also, as a miner, can get paid transaction fees. Historically, transaction fees have been very low, kind of, you know, sub 20% of what your revenue is. But I think it was earlier this year or end of last year, with Bitcoin ordinals, we actually saw transaction fees spike higher than the subsidy. So the whole point being, like, if there's lots of people using it, then there's still revenue there. The good news is, regardless of what happens, I'll be dead. So unfortunately or fortunately, I'm not going to have to worry about that one. But that is the thought process is actually, I think every single person for the most part is going to be dead. So everyone listening to this too, your opinion doesn't matter either. But the thought process is that transaction fees will take over.
And with Bitcoin becoming such a major part of your career and identity really in the public eye, I thought it'd be an interesting thing to think about of like, what if Bitcoin was never created? Where do you think you'd be today? How would your career have gone differently?
I
Well,
mean, you know, look, I think from the outside, there's a lot of people who know me for the Bitcoin stuff, which, you know, is great, and I'm appreciative of it. But I've never really tied my identity to Bitcoin or anything else, right? I've always been almost to a fault, very focused on. I want to be as clean, clear, and independent of a thinker as possible. And so Bitcoin to me is a asset that fits into a worldview that I have, that provides a lot of asymmetry and kind of is this like counter bet to the consensus. But if it wasn't Bitcoin, there would probably be something else, right? And there's been plenty of companies throughout the years that I've invested in that actually fit very similarly into you know, that framework. It's just that they're a company, and a company that ends up being competing with, a bunch of other companies isn't nearly as maybe controversial or debatable as this idea of a currency. And so, I always think about like if Bitcoin was just a company, right? Would people be freaking out as much? Like, well, they freak out about Tesla, right? So that's like another controversial one. It's like maybe, but I do think there's something about it being a currency versus a company, or like an organization or an entity that really triggers people. And we'll see. So far, the critics are losing.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to ask you, which is a big switch up to just end this on a nice note, is you talked about how you were a father before. I'm not a father yet. I would love to be a great one someday. What advice would you give to fathers out there, and how has it shifted your mindset or perspective after becoming a dad?
I don't know if I'm a great source of dad advice yet, right? I've only been doing it for a few years, but I think I just have kind of a clear framework of the more time I can spend with my kid, the better, right? The more that I can talk to them, the better, and then also like the better example that I can be for them, the better as well. And so it's kind of just like spend time, be engaged, and then just serve as a role model, right? And if you do those three things, like sure, do I get frustrated sometimes? Of course. Do I mess things up, or I probably don't feed her at the right time or something if my wife's not around and she's like, hey, what the hell happened? Like, yeah, obviously, we're all kind of figuring it out as we go. But if you get the big things right, then the small things kind of matter less. And I think that's kind of been my philosophy. In terms of how it's changed my perspective, I was always a pretty long-term thinker, but I think even more so, after having our daughter. And then the second thing is like kids, especially young kids, they really remind you like how oblivious we are to the world. And what I mean by that is, we'll be walking down the sidewalk and she'll yell out, pink or blue or whatever. And I'm like, where is blue? And then I realize it's like literally right in front of my face. And, as an adult, you start to think about like, I hope that car doesn't pop the sidewalk and like run into us. Right. Like you're like more aware of, the important things. And so you kind of lose sight of the small things. And so it just kind of refocuses you and says, hey, look, maybe you should, kind of look around and pay attention to details. And then, there's nothing better than a little kid laughing, man. Right. Like, you just see them and how happy they are. And it's like they have no cares whatsoever in the world. And it's inspirational to a degree, right? Where you're just like, hey, I'd love to get a piece of that every day. And try to mimic that myself in my life. And so having a young kid around is really helpful for that.
Hmm. Appreciating life's minutia. It sounds like something that more people they get focused on career, job, stressed, and they gotta take a step back and appreciate life. I didn't want to take up too much of your time today. I really am so appreciative of you coming on. For people wondering like why is Pomp on this podcast, like I was badgering him for a while on Instagram, just being that
How
little.
many times did you message me? I don't actually
Oh,
check. I don't check Instagram DMs that much. So the fact I saw it was pretty good. Let's see. Hold on.
oh,
Let
I
me
have
see.
to. I think you're like selling yourself short. You respond to me. I mean, I'm one of those people that I like reach out to just people way out of my arena like all the time. You answer all the time.
All right, hold on. Ready? So 1, 2, 3. Man,
Oh,
some
don't
of the
count.
memes you sent me. Some of the memes you sent me are pretty good. Hold on. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28,
I didn't reach
29,
out.
30, 31, 32. Hold on. 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43. All right. So like 40 times, give or take. And some of those are like, you said something, I responded, you responded, whatever. But I would say maybe 25 of the 40 are like you directly reaching out. And there is this element in life of, I mean, some of these things are stupid, that, right? Like they're like dumb memes or whatever. And some of them are like insightful commentary, but there is an element of persistence. Right. And at the end of the day, we live in a society where if someone leaves you on red, people are like offended, right? The best entrepreneurs I know, the next day they're just right back there. Hey, did you see this? Hey, did you see this? We have a company where we have a sales team, and they close a lot of sales, and I credit a huge piece of it to they are willing to email people 7, 8, 9 times without a response and still be enthusiastic about emailing them the 11th time. And usually the response is not like, hey, leave me alone. Because normally what's happened is like there was some sort of call or initial, meeting, and then the person got busy. And so it's follow up, like, you told me you were interested in this. We haven't heard from you, whatever. And after the 11th time, someone would be like, oh, sorry, I was traveling. And then this happened and this happened. Like, yeah, we're signing the contract and like, we're excited to work with you guys.
Mhm.
And you're just like, that literally is like lost revenue inside some of these companies who weren't willing to send not only 2 or 3 emails, but 11 emails. And so it's just staying on it and doing it respectfully and not, being a crazy person. But if you do that, good things come in life from those that are persistent.
Yeah, for the people, 40 messages, that was over the course of like a while. But also it's like, so like for me, I take my ego out of social media. So when I reach out to people, if they don't answer, they don't answer.
Of
I
course.
don't take any offense to it at all.
Dude, I DM people. I got a ton of followers on Twitter also. I DM people all the time. They don't respond. That's
Mhm.
fine.
Yeah.
Right. I'll tell you one thing. I can't use their name. Cause I don't know if they'd be cool with it, but I was reading a book recently and I saw someone's name and it was like not the subject of the book. It was like somebody who worked with the subject of the book. And so I saw this person's name. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Usually they wouldn't name that person. They would just talk about the role. So I Googled who the person was. I saw they had a Twitter account. I clicked on it. They followed me on Twitter already. And so I just DM'd them. And literally the DM was like, I was reading this book. I saw your name. I'd like to talk to you. Like, are you ever in New York or could we do a phone call? And they didn't respond for a few days. Then they did respond. They gave me their email. I emailed them. They said, I come to New York every once in a while. I'll let you know next time I come. 4 weeks later, they said to me, hey, I'm going to be in New York tomorrow. And that person ended up coming to a dinner I was hosting at my house with a bunch of other people. And we spent like 2 hours together. And I learned an incredible amount. And when they left, I said to myself, I've never read a book before, saw someone's name and went and messaged them. I'm going to do that for every single person now that I see that's interesting in one of these books. And again, maybe I only talk to 10% of them. But the fact that this one person I got to meet in person, spend so much time with, learned a ton from, etc. Like, dude, the internet is an amazing place. And so like leverage it, right? So I think what you're doing is actually incredibly smart. And, people who think that is dumb, maybe they're the dumb ones.
Yeah, yeah, it ties back to like the whole theme of the channel, which is bargain with life for a penny. I want to see people become the best versions of themselves, and I think me having conversations with people like you who have been so successful will help people do that, and hopefully help their outlook and mindset in life. Um, that's basically where I want to end it. If you have anything else to say,
Nah, I hope everyone follows you, downloads podcasts. I think you're doing a great job. So keep it up and keep sending me memes. I always appreciate those too.
you got it.